Hey
Hello.
y'all. Melissa, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in. I'll give people a minute to join in on here, but I'm super excited. I'm back with another conversation with Melissa Gallardo, who is the founder of Bonita Fierce Candles. I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have today about Latinas and entrepreneurship. Just because this has been so much of my own journey. I've had to, I've made multiple career pivots myself and went from kind of that employee to, solopreneur. And then I have the privilege right now of leading the Mujeres de Hace Entrepreneur Program, which is a Latina leadership program for entrepreneurs through the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. So I'm super excited just to be here and talking to you today. For those of you that don't know Melissa, you should, but let me tell you a little about Melissa and her company, Bonita Fierce Candles. So a little about Melissa. Being Latina and American isn't a linear experience. And for Melissa, it's also meant a lifelong struggle to navigate language, culture, and heritage as a brown, non-speaking Spanish Latina. It created a deep insecurity in her identity and distorted some of the feelings of what home meant. Then she realized that this feeling of belonging, of finding your place, of being home, she wanted to create that same experience and feeling for other Latinas that were on a similar journey. And so she poured her first candle. She realized that the scents that she grew up with weren't represented in the home fragrance industry and set out to create fragrances that celebrate, honor, and represent the cultural crossroads of being Latina and American. And so right now she is cementing a space for Latinas and fragrance. So Melissa, I just love, I love that story of kind of, the different parts of your identity. And if you could just share with us a little more about your cultural identity, how you identify, and how that's kind of shaped your life, both, personally and professionally.
Absolutely. So, a little bit about me. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and it's actually one of the top 10 most segregated suburbs in the country. And with that in mind, I really couldn't find my place where I grew up. I grew up in a really white centered home district. I was one of the only Latinas in my class up until I got into high school, where I saw some more diversity roll in. But when I grew up, I couldn't be myself. I was straightening my hair. I was being made fun of because also wasn't fluent in Spanish. And I never felt like I was enough. So I was never Latina enough. I was not white. So I just couldn't figure out where I could fit in. And that really translated into my everyday life and into my career. So eventually I went on my own like curly hair journey, really embracing my own identity. And when I was shopping for products that represented my identity, I was looking for makeup brands, hair care brands, like anything I can get my hands on that really felt I connected to. I didn't find anything in the candle space. And at the same time, it was the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, I was burning more and more candles. And while I was home, I was working my full-time job at the time, my 9 to 5. And I realized that there weren't any candle brands or any fragrance brands at all that represented my Latinidad. And that's when I decided to take what was my side hustle of pouring candles and make it my full-time job today.
Okay, I love that. And I think what you're saying, I mean, it resonates so much with me because I grew up in a very very white suburb. Like I always tell the story that I was one of a handful of kids that sat at the Mexican table at lunch, and like we did not even have Latino diversity. It was literally just a handful of other Mexicans, and I, it was the same thing because my Spanish, I knew a little bit of Spanish, but I wasn't fluent. So I was still taking Spanish class.
Yeah.
And people would ask me like, why are you taking Spanish class? Don't you know the Spanish? And I had to say no. And, I don't know if the word complicate is the right thing, but like my father passed away when I was 14 months old, and my mom remarried to an American. So that was a whole other element too, right? Of like, well, you don't look Hispanic, or you don't sound Hispanic, or those little kind of microaggressions that would go on. And And so I think that there are, plenty of people in our audience that even could relate to, that feeling of not feeling Latino enough, or but not feeling American enough, and just where do I fit in? Where do I belong? But I don't know if you saw, Becky G actually recently had a video where she talked about like embracing all of, her Latinidad and all of, being American. And she used the phrase 200%er, that she was a 200%. And I just love that, because it's really embracing and saying like, I can be all of it. And
Absolutely.
I think there's so much power in that.
And I couldn't agree more. Like, and Becky G isn't even the only one who coins the term. It's actually in so many of like marketing materials and research about, Latinos in this country, our buying power, how much we're growing as a population, and just the sheer power that we have on the US economy. And there's definitely so much nuance to one's identity and their Latinidad. And that's one thing that I've always felt connected to. And like you said, there are so many layers to it. Like for me, I couldn't speak Spanish. The fear of being discriminated against, experiencing racism in my community was so predominant that my mom's fear was I was going to fall behind in school. The teachers in the district and, society around her told her, don't teach your daughter Spanish. It will hold her back in life. And you had to assimilate. My mom came here when she was 10 years old, so she grew up in the US, but with in mind, that my abuela was working in the factories, that my mom got to work in offices, and that opportunity for me, is to progress further. You have to learn English, you have to be fluent in English, no accent. It's going to get you farther in life. And, that's not the case at all today, as much as we've embraced identity. But that progression didn't exist when I was growing up in the early 2000s and in the 90s. Like, it just didn't exist. So now that I can take back my culture and also have all those layers, like you said, you're taking all these cultures, and Becky G also experienced how she was going to other countries and learning their slang in Spanish and taking those part of your identity with you. So I really identify not only as, Salvadorian American, but as a U.S. Latina, because while I've never visited my parents' homeland, and there's a lot of layers to that in itself, but I get to experience my multicultural family's like heritage. Like, my cousins are half Puerto Rican, so my cousins are half Mexican or half Dominican, and I get to be in this melting pool in the U.S. of Latinidad.
Yeah, and the demographics are showing that, we're growing, fastest growing population, and I think the demographics, I want to say by 20, can't remember all of a sudden if it's 2030 or 2050, but we'll be the, one in three women will be Latina. So as Claudia Romo Edelman says, it'll be, hola, hi, hola, or hello, hola, because, we're going to be just that predominant. So there's definitely a shift going on right now, I think, with that. And I think there's a shift too, to your point, in kind of this reclamation of our identity, right? And taking back. And I know in even in these conversations I'm having, I have a couple episodes coming up with some other guests that are going to talk about that specifically, is like, reclaiming some of our cultural identity that we've lost, and knowing that our families did what they thought was best for us, and, what was accepted, and try to help us move ahead. And it seems like now we're in the shift of kind of this like reclaiming what has either been lost or even, I mean, I guess you could even say stolen.
I couldn't agree more. And that's really what my brand is all about. And that's in my own personal journey too. Like, I'm reclaiming my roots and celebrating my ancestors. And that is, a lifelong struggle I will have for the rest of my life. I'm going to be reclaiming the roots that were lost. And, my grandma had passed when I was very young. I was 4 years old. So I didn't really get to experience grandparents either. Most of my grandparents had passed, and when I was a child. So that things could not be passed on if my mom or my father didn't already know.
Yeah.
So reclaiming roots, it's like I'm on this journey of my Latinidad forever. And my brand also really takes that into consideration too. So every scent that we're creating is meant to reclaim your roots, honor your ancestors, celebrate your culture and heritage the way you see fit, because you are 100% American, 100% Latina. And
Yeah.
so all like our scents, cafecito con leche, that is a staple Latin American coffee. And it's the same with, up and coming scents and coquito, it's Puerto Rican spiked eggnog. So many Latinos and non-Latinos enjoy this drink. But it's a part of our heritage and our roots. And I want to be able to create those scents and experiences through fragrance.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing. I've heard Fabuloso is also one of your scents, right? Which I like. I'm absolutely fascinated by, and I love that because it's such a distinct, fragrance.
It is, and it's like the running joke, but it's probably one of the best ones, and it smells amazing. So who's complaining?
Yeah, exactly. And hey, I'm going to encourage the audience to engage in the chat, because at the end, I'm going to pull a name and I'm going to actually send you one of Melissa's candles. So, you can pick one online, and I'll send it as a gift just for listening and participating. So make sure to engage in the chat and stuff like that. So tell us a little more about your journey into entrepreneurship. Like, did you want to grow up and be an entrepreneur, or how did you end up coming here? Because I was even thinking, as I wrote a LinkedIn post this morning about entrepreneurship, and just how I always say it is the fastest way to personal and professional development that there ever is, because there are just a lot of high lows, barriers, overcoming, reiterations. So what has that journey into entrepreneurship looked like for you?
Oh my God, I did not know what I was getting into until I did. I did not expect to be an entrepreneur in the slightest. I was in corporate America. I had just graduated college in 2019, and I was working at one of the top 10 media companies in the world. And while I was there, I was starting to feel very unfulfilled. I realized what I studied, I didn't really want to practice in the real world. Like, I love, communication. I studied broadcasting, and even went to graduate school for media management. But then lo and behold, I get to working, and I didn't like it. I didn't like putting it into practice. And I only realized that less than a year into working full time. And I truly thought this was what I was going to do my whole life, because I knew exactly what I wanted to study. I did like 6 internships, and I earned my way to the top, already as an entry-level employee. But I also realized that I felt the golden handcuffs coming my way, and I didn't want to feel so tied to my job. And as I was learning more about personal finance, and I wanted to create my own path, and I wanted to build wealth and learn about wealth building. And so I stumbled into wanting to do a side hustle. But then the pandemic happened. So my side hustle was candle making. I was making candles in my kitchen, and that stumbled into me, having a business full time. Lo and behold, like, it started to pick up. I quit my job. I took the risk on myself. But
let me
I didn't realize what I was getting into.
Yeah. Do you think you would have taken the path had you realized it?
No, probably not.
I think that's what most entrepreneurs
say. Way too hard. And I'm almost 3 years into the idea, 2.5 years in business. And I still can't believe how far I took it in the time I did. But also, I didn't realize what was ahead of me. I thought it was going to be just like, it was going to be a side hustle. And then I realized how fulfilling it was to be doing what I was doing, but also how much impact I could be making in this space, because multicultural fragrance doesn't exist. The candle inclusion doesn't exist. We're seeing eucalyptus and spearmint. We're seeing, lavender lemonades of the world, like, cinnamons, like basic fragrances, pumpkin spice. And while all of those are great, they don't actually have this cultural connection to us. They just smell good. you
And
know, at
how
the
did
end
you
of the day.
put two and two together? I'm just curious about that. Like, were you looking for a specific fragrance, or like, how did you notice that and then say like, oh, here's a gap that I can fill?
I didn't really feel like it was a aha moment until I started like blending fragrances together. You know, when I was starting to come up with like, you know, when I was like, oh, what's my niche gonna be in the candle world? I just naturally kind of steered that way. And then doing, you know, some market research, I realized no one was doing this. And so I just felt the need to do it. And then once I started creating fragrances like Cafecito con Leche, like Coquito, and other fragrances, I just felt like this was the right space because you would Google Coquito candle, it didn't exist. You know, Cafecito con Leche candle didn't exist. Lavender Fabulosa didn't exist. So I felt like I was just trailblazing in this space, and I am now. And I'm creating more fragrances to really represent our experiences.
Yeah, and that I love it. Like I always love supporting other Latinas, and I feel like even purchasing products that speak to our culture is a way of embracing or reclaiming our identity too. So I just really appreciate it. And Tira here says, Ruby, I love how you continue to share these stories. Thank you for using your platform and continuing to partner and highlight them. Melissa, thank you for being here today. Can relate so much of yours and Ruby's personal story as well as the entrepreneurship journey. Still struggling with the juggle today and the 9 to 5 and entrepreneurship. And yeah, I think that is so common. Thanks, Tira, for being here, and shout out to all the mujeres that are watching. Because I think that it is definitely, there are a lot of people that are kind of like trying to, hold down a full-time job and also, start their side hustle. Now, did you go straight into, because the pandemic hit and then were you laid off and then did this and then just
No.
went full time, or how did that look?
So, firstly, before the pandemic, I was commuting 2 hours each way into Manhattan because
Oof.
I live very far out east on Long Island, and it is not a fun commute. So I like reclaimed all of that time, and I had the energy of a 22-year-old. So when I reclaimed all my time, I felt kind of lost. I'm like, what else do I do with my time outside my 9 to 5? And so that's when I started like picking up hobbies. And then, you know, I wanted to build the website, and all of that said, like, I really wanted to build something meaningful. I really wanted to leave impact on the world. And this was my means to do it, because not only, you know, is this part of my journey in reclaiming my Latinidad, but this is also representative of so many groups of Latinos. Like, this is such a huge commonality. You know, you could talk about a dreamer who was not born in the United States, but does not feel American enough, but are American. You know, like this, and, you know, the people who've been here in childhood, immigrants coming, you know, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're growing up in the United States. Lo and behold, they spend over half of their life here, still do not feel American enough. And while they've been here, they're nearly their entire lives. So the experience just goes so many ways. You know, my sister is, also like me, Latina American, was born here, but doesn't, you know, reclaim her Latinidad in the same way that I do. And she doesn't express herself the way I do in her Latinidad and in her own journey. And so I felt like this is exactly where I'm meant to be, into creating this space and having these conversations about reclaiming your roots, like healing, you know, your ancestral roots, and really celebrating who you are, and elevating our culture, celebrating our cultural across many industry and many spaces. And for me, fragrance was the space for me to do it.
Yeah. Oh, and I love that, celebrating. We're so, I think there's so much narrative and, cultural scripts around being hardworking and, it's, the grit and the resilience. And I don't think we talk about celebration enough, right? And like how that can look and, play, and just being in a mode of thriving instead of surviving. Andrea here says, my Colombian self can totally smell the cafecito con leche candle and the fabuloso one. I love the creativity. And Jeanette
Thank
says,
you.
thank you, ladies. Currently working on starting my own business. So thanks for the encouragement. Yes, Jeanette, I love that. And Melissa, how do you see your company evolving? Comes in from this LinkedIn user here.
Oh my God. I get this question pretty often right now. Like, we're Bonita Fierce Candles, so we're so dedicated to the fragrance space in candles because most people do burn candles. And so right now I'm actually very focused on evolving the kinds of fragrances that we're playing with because this is such a new space. I'm still learning alongside my consumers and my audience. I'm here, playing around with gourmands, like the cakes, the traditional cakes, the sweet fragrances, and I'm playing with spices. I'm playing with fruits and seeing what really resonates with our audience. So my goal right now is to really evolve like the fragrance wheel, similar to a color wheel where you go around in a whole circle. It's a similar experience in fragrance in the categories of fragrance. So I'd really love to explore this wheel of fragrance, anything from like, what we used to call ocean breeze to, the cafecito con leches of the world, to spices, florals that are native to our countries. Like, I really want to be able to put those experiences at the forefront. One product I've been working for like the longest time is trying to figure out how to use guava. It is so hard to work with, but I'm determined to make it work. So that's definitely one fragrance that, that will evolve with me down the line. But again, it's, I'm always taking, feedback. Oh, I always want to hear what our audience wants. And it's really exciting to see like how I can bring our culture into fragrance, whether it's food, drink, music, historical figures. Like I have candles that are based on historical figures like Celia Cruz and Walter Mercado, and also doing some education about, the nature and experience of being in our homelands too. So we have Spanish moss, which is native to Mexico and many areas of Central America, but is also something, a plant and tree, and it's a moss. It's moss that is native also to the southeast of the United States as well.
Yeah, like I'm thinking Georgia a lot. Georgia and South Carolina.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that you said earlier, and it's exciting to hear about all the developments in terms of like fragrance combinations that might not even exist. Oh, like this is a good comment here. I'm not sure who. It doesn't show your name, but I like this. Scented Santo air freshener. There you go. Air fresheners might be the way to go.
Right.
But one of the things that that you made me think of earlier when you were talking is, entrepreneurship can be really healing too. I didn't really, this just dawned on me today, actually, as I was thinking about how, for me, entrepreneurship really personally spotlighted a lot of my strengths, but it also spotlighted a lot of my insecurities or fears. It's like,
Yep.
shining a light on them, and they're exemplified during the process of entrepreneurship. And, I would say earlier in my journey, it was very confronting, but what it did was it forced me to look at parts of myself that maybe I didn't want to, or to face those fears or insecurities head on. So it kind of forced me onto this healing journey, and it's made me grow so much as a result of it. So it has been very much a healing journey in the process. So I'm curious for you, when it comes to, being an entrepreneur, and how entrepreneurship has maybe helped you personally. Like, there's probably tons of things you've learned professionally, right? And you could talk about, like, I didn't even know this existed in the candle. But like, what are some of the things that you personally had to come up against, and kind of, either in the process of still learning to navigate, or have overcome, when it comes to some of those personal hurdles?
I still suffer so deeply from imposter syndrome. And, personally, I've always felt so insecure about my age. And I'm about to turn 26. And I've been in this game for 2.5 years, almost 3. And I still feel like I don't have enough experience. And that's something that I always struggled with, and trying to realize like, no, I definitely am qualified to be talking about these topics now. And, the things that I've been working on do matter and do have value. And that's definitely something that I've struggled with to this day, and I think a lot of it does have to do with ageism for the most part, and just saying and I'm very open about my age. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, because, ageism still exists in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And if I disclose that, people will immediately say that I'm not qualified, that I'm inexperienced, I don't have professionalism, I don't know how to act, and I don't know how to speak, or I simply don't know how to do my job based on my age. And I'm here to say that's absolutely not true. I'm the first Latino-owned candle brand in Nordstrom. I was the youngest Latina.
Yeah, shout out to you. That's huge. Everyone, give us a round of applause, because that is quite the accomplishment.
Yes, it really is. And I can't, and it doesn't happen without the right people behind you, the right networks, but also because I really put myself out there. I put myself on the line. And it also says that it doesn't matter how old you are to start something. I might be young, but it could happen at any age. And It took me 2.5 years to do it. And it could take somebody so much longer. And I have a very long way to go if I want to reach the audience I want. Like, I want to be a staple in people's houses. Like, I want people to know who Bonita Fierce Candles is worldwide. And that is a very ambitious goal. And so my journey to be able to get to that point is going to take years and years and years of hard work. But to say that, I'm sold at Nordstrom, to say that I've participated in the Ulta Beauty Music Accelerator as the youngest and only Latina founder there, says that I'm trailblazing in this space and leading the way in Latinas in fragrance. Again, doesn't exist except for very, very few select people. Perfuming, it takes longer to become a certified perfumer than it does to complete medical school through residency. Wow. It really is an intensive program. I'm here to break the stereotype that fragrance's home is in Europe, because it's not. Europeans didn't invent fragrance. And there's so many places around the world that need to be explored in scents and in fragrance. And I want to be the one to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, if anything, you're modeling what's possible when you start to get outside of some of those limiting beliefs, right? And it could be that, oh, I'm too young, or it could be on the flip side, like, oh, I'm, too old, or I missed my prime. Even for me, sometimes I get in my head, like, I'm 45, I wish I would have done the things sooner, but I think everyone is on their journey, right? And we have to respect the journey that we're on, because that's the journey that we're meant to be on, right? And but I think it doesn't matter whatever those limiting beliefs are. It's about believing in yourself, forging ahead, having a vision. It sounds like you have a very clear vision of what you want and what you desire for yourself, for your company, and just for the greater industry even.
Yes.
And Andrea asked, and I'd be curious to hear, what did that call feel like when you found out that you were going to be in Nordstrom's? Walk us through, what were you doing? What did you say? What did they say? What was that like?
Oh my God. It was like the same feeling that I got when I got my first feature in a major magazine. And funny enough, it wasn't a call. It was an Instagram DM. So how did the call feel? It wasn't a call. It was a notification.
Instagram deal?
It was a notification from one of the buyers out at Nordstrom. And they slid into my DMs. They're like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm, a buyer at Nordstrom, and I love your company. I would love to hop on a call with you." And I was like, oh my God. And funny enough, it was about a year ago that this happened. And we hopped on a call. It was like 30 minutes, which there's not a lot of time in 30 minutes. Like you really got to make it count in 30 minutes. And so from there, just talking about my capabilities, like how much I can produce, and being very transparent that I'm still in my garage. Like I'm still working out of my home. Right now I'm still working out of my home. Like I am in the process of like redoing like a portion of my house. Like I have a higher end house. So like the bottom portion of it, we're like gutting and like moving in. I previously had a storage unit where I was like shipping all the candles because I ran out of space. And then now we're moving everything back. I got a shed for materials. So like I'm still massively growing in my home, but we're still a home-based business. And I like it that way.
Yeah.
You know, I do not want to go to a contract manufacturer. Like I'm very purposeful about that because I want to be in charge of my formulas. I want to be able to create impact in my community, hire people who really care about our mission or our vision, and create impact where it matters. And I don't see it. And many candle businesses are able to do this. Other home fragrance brands are able to keep it in-house, do warehousing. You know, once I get out of my home, I can rent a warehouse, I can get a space and work with other partners to be able to make that happen. So it's definitely a journey to get there.
We're holding the vision with you. We're holding the vision with you.
Yeah.
Angela says, trailblazer who realizes they've learned new things. The learning does make you well qualified. Yes, definitely. Yes. Right. Zara says, the only people I know that suffer from imposter syndrome are ambitious boss women. Thank you for going against the grain and pursuing your dreams. You're such an inspiration, Melissa. Adelante. Getting lots of love. Tiara, I got to drop, but she'll catch the remaining. Thank you, Tiara, for showing up. And yeah, that's the kind of sliding into my DMs I can get down with for sure. Yeah. For sure.
I do not ignore anybody's DMs, that's for sure.
So one of the other questions I have is just around, you know, some of the failures you've had. I think it's very easy, especially, you know, with social media, and a lot of times we're, you know, curating specific content and showing the highlights. And you know, but there's a lot going on in the background that we don't talk about. And one of the things that I really want to do is just normalize failure, because failure is never, you know, it's never about like an identity that we take on. Just because like you fail at something doesn't mean that you're a failure. And I think that a lot of people still relate it to it is that way. It's like, oh, I failed, so that means I'm a failure. But no, the two things are very distinct. And I think, you know, when we can learn from our failures, we can, there's so many other ways to look at it. We can learn from them. We can, you know, use the information as feedback. So, you know, what are some of the things that maybe we haven't seen or, you know, curated, but what have been some of the failures or a failure that you've either had to, you know, overcome, or that you learned something from?
I feel like I've definitely failed plenty of times, like little failures and some big ones. Gotta say, one of the big ones is because I just simply didn't know what I was doing. And that was with my first Nordstrom PO. I was trying to get out the door. And you don't really get a lot of support when you're in a major retail. That's one thing that's not talked about enough, is that especially when you're a BIPOC brand and you don't have the people, funds, etc., to kind of get it off the ground. Like you got the yes, they said yes, but like now what? Well, the now what is they hand you a website or the equivalent of a textbook and say, here you go. You're expected to know everything by XYZ date. And if you don't, you get chargebacks. Oh, and that is probably one of the scariest times, was reading that cover to cover and understanding and learning the ins and outs before I was ready. And I only started to learn those things through accelerators and incubators and programs. But at the time, I didn't have the network. I didn't have the support. I didn't have the other business owners in my circle that were, you know, kind of given this opportunity to leverage and to learn from. So I quickly failed, didn't get a chargeback, but realized as I was creating like the shipments and the bill of lading and doing all the logistics for shipping, what I was missing. And so I got on like a 25-person chain email trying to fix said problem because, and I was CCing my buyer and transit and like my carrier, and it got really excessive. And I just didn't know what I was doing. Thankfully, my buyer was on my side. She's like, don't worry about it. Like this, it'll work out. Any chargebacks will get waived. It's your first order. It'll be okay. But a lot of the times that doesn't happen. So that is definitely one failure in my book, but have definitely learned from. Haven't made the same mistake again because as a solo entrepreneur, you got to learn everything. And it wasn't my strong suit. I would love to hire it out eventually, but definitely didn't. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't really talk about is, in failures is alongside social media and being able to represent your audience authentically and whether or not you want to be on camera so much. And for me, it's been very difficult to like share not only the good experiences, but the bad ones. And the bad ones I tend to highlight on LinkedIn because that's part of my story as a founder, but not always I feel like necessary to highlight on my brand's page, but maybe my personal pages. And finding that balance of what I do and don't want to share throughout my journey and through my own learnings. And those failures definitely come with time. I really think at this point, I'm trying to take my time as I grow. Like as much as I want to scale and whatnot, the ability to say no. And so I don't publicly flop on my face as it happens. But I definitely have realized how much power I have in my network to be able to solve said problems, get experiences, interview people, get on like 15-minute calls and realize what do I do need, what do I need to look out for, and continue on in that journey.
Yeah, definitely. So important. I mean, I think having a community that you can gain knowledge from and, share advice. I know whenever I talk to someone that asks me about like starting consulting or coaching business or anything like that, or speaking, one of the first things I tell them is how I failed the first time.
Yeah. I failed the first time in corporate more than anything.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned enough in the workforce. I'm like, okay, let's not do that in entrepreneurship. Let's not try and do that again.
Yeah. Because you learn from your failures, right? Like you said, you're never going to make that mistake that you made that first time ever again, right? Because you learn from it. There's a question here from Veronica, with both working and doing your business and how you manage expectations with your corporate employer so that they don't think you're slacking. And I think this comes up for a lot of entrepreneurs that are, trying to build their side hustle, but also trying to stay focused. What has, balance, I guess, look like for you?
This is a really great question because I did feel like, at the time that my work was beginning to suffer, and it's because I truly felt like I was unfulfilled. So one thing I definitely say is to prioritize what you want if you want to stay in corporate and then keep this a side hustle, or eventually transition your side hustle into your full-time gig, and really deciding what that priority is going to be. And I know this has been such the talk of the town on LinkedIn, but quiet quitting in a way, and only doing your job as it states in your job requirements and don't doing more than what you should be or what you want to be doing. Working your 8 hours and meeting your job qualifications and expectations, and just meeting them and not going above and beyond because you want to be able to spend more time, whether it's with your family or whether it's for your side hustle, and transitioning that into your full-time work. So so I was very transparent in the beginning about what I was doing in my free time. Like I was also going to graduate school when I was working in corporate. I was doing my online courses, and then I was also building a side hustle. So there really wasn't a lot of time for me to, mess around with other projects, but I was just doing my job. I knew exactly what I had to do, get my work done, and any free time I did have, I was working on Bonita Fierce Candles. And so my didn't suffer for it until I was ready to quit.
And I think as a follow-up question, one of the questions that I have is because entrepreneurship can be stressful, right? Let's get real about that.
Yeah,
It can
it's
be
stressful.
stressful at times.
Not
And
all the time. No, it's like stressful all the time. If somebody says that they're like very mellow, they're like, yeah, everything's fine. Like they're a liar. Yeah, you're stressed. I'm stressed like 99% of the time.
so so here's my question, because this is real, right? Like, I mean, it can be pretty stressful. So how do you manage that stress and prioritize yourself?
Good question. I really make sure that I set aside the time to spend with my loved ones and for myself. So like I know that on Friday nights I will spend it by myself, like reflecting, I'm done by like 4. Mentally I'm done by like 4 o'clock. And the rest of the evening I don't spend with anybody else but me, because I know I need to regain my energy. And then I spend, the weekend with my loved ones and making sure that boundary is set. And I can't be working on this business 24/7, 7 days a week. Most of the time I'm working on the business 6 days a week. And I'm putting in more than a work day's worth of work. But also I need to make sure I'm taking care of me. Because if I'm not taking care of me, I'm going to be burned out. My business is going to suffer for it.
Yep.
So, maxing out the amount of hours that I'm working, and also taking on projects and work that is meaningful for me and that I want to do. Otherwise, I'm at the point in business where I'm just going to hire it out. Like if there's something, I always say, hire out your weaknesses, things you don't want to do, give to somebody else. If you can do that, do it. And it has made a world of a difference. I mean, the first thing I did when I was able to budget it was an accountant and bookkeeping and financial projections and payroll. That was like the first thing, because I did not want to spend hours looking at spreadsheets, going through my cogs.
It's like corporate all over again.
It's horrible. I did not get into this business to be looking at spreadsheets.
Yeah.
That's not why I decided to become an entrepreneur. So getting to the things that I want to do. So doing strategy, doing marketing, create product development is my favorite part of my job. And so those are the things I want to be doing every day.
Yeah. It's real though. Like it's because I feel like when you're on, and when you're off. But like when you love your job and you love what you're doing, it's sometimes hard to turn off. Like I've been told that I'm addicted to work, and it was funny because this weekend I had gone away to a hotel with my partner, and I was like, should I take my laptop? Like, no.
Oh, I'll take my laptop. The problem is opening it. Don't open it.
And I was like, okay, I won't. But like, I snuck a book in my like notebook in my bag. Now, thankfully, I did not end up, going into it. But sometimes it's really hard. But what I've learned is like sometimes even like that shift of just like changing your environment, for a weekend or a night can really make a difference. And it was nice not to be just thinking about work. And I didn't realize, wow, I really needed this space to breathe too,
I couldn't agree more. I think my favorite way to decompress at this point is obviously light a candle. I gotta light my own.
Of course.
Mostly I'm lighting my testers at this point. So like all the new products, like I'm testing. So low-key working, but not really, because they're doing their own thing. They're burning 4 hours of time, and I'll be like, okay, like this fills up a room. But on the other end, like I'm also taking out a book, like physically reading a book that doesn't involve my work.
Yes.
Like I'm reading a book for pure joy, and it's my favorite way to turn off, because as an entrepreneur, you're always like online on your phone or work, or you're out in the field, whatever it is. But I find myself scrolling with the purpose of my business in the back of my mind. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Saving posts, saving ideas,
yes.
Brainstorming. That's still working. So I find myself having to separate obviously my accounts, but going in completely tuning out, turning off electronically. Like there's nothing else but what's in front of me, which is this book.
Yeah.
And I think it's the healthiest way for me to decompress and get out of my own mind, because I'm so focused on one thing.
Yeah. I know for me, it's a lot of times it's nature too. Like I go on, excuse me, daily walks and feel like I just have to connect to nature to like clear my mind. Sometimes I'm still thinking about it, but then I start walking and I also just feel like I try to be really present and looking at like the leaves and the trees and like I stop at the creek and I always look for snakes or frogs or turtles or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Just because it is important to have that mindfulness, and it's also inspiring to me. So then I can go back and write or create or do whatever it is that's next. I think this is Stephanie Haynes that's writing here. Melissa, is the first mover in a new product creation, you have the potential to gain half of the market if any other players are even trying to enter the game. Are you journaling your journey to help others, first timers, learn from your areas of opportunity? I think we all want to learn from the best because there are so few of us entering these spaces. Great question. I love
This
that.
is a good question. I find myself, it's really hard to journal for me. I've never really been a huge journaler, but when I do find the need to like express what I'm feeling, I tend to go on LinkedIn. I tend to like, especially when I'm going through a hard time or I feel like something very much moves me, I document it. But one thing I do, I've taken this from corporate. Somebody told me when I was an intern to always write down your wins. So every time you get a compliment, like it's kind of like the opposite of a burn book. So I'm writing every compliment somebody ever like gives me, and that has always given me so much encouragement throughout the years. And low-key, if you're still in corporate, you can use this to help you get a promotion, which is probably one of the most motivating reasons on why I did it. But now, I speak so much of my accomplishments, and sometimes it's hard to really reflect on them. And I think this really speaks to many, BIPOC folks out there, people of color, Latinas, that I'm really not able to just celebrate my accomplishments. I've never been one to feel like I'm the center of attention. And so when those things happen, I have to write them down. Because it come like even when reflection time at New Year's, what do I talk about? Well, I can go back and see all of the things that I've done throughout this time. So journaling is a difficult task for me. I feel like it's a chore. So I tend to just write down compliments and things that feel like they're meaningful for me throughout my journey.
Yeah. It's so good too, because I think we have a tendency to always look at what's next. And so we're always like just looking ahead. What's the next thing I need to do? What's the next thing? Right. And sometimes we have to stop and take a look backwards and say, look how far I've come. Yeah. Right. Look at like how much I've accomplished. Look, I just did that last month, as a matter of fact, because it was just such a busy month. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did X amount of speaking engagements. I talk
we're moving very fast.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff. And I had to stop and be like, man, that was like so much you did in 1 month that you hadn't done like that amount of like, it was a lot of public speaking around it. Right. Yeah. And I was just like, that's something to be proud of, Ruby. And we have to acknowledge ourselves, for those steps too. Right. It's always great to get that outside acknowledgement, but also just to like stop and take inventory and be like, wow, I've really grown in this area. A couple of years ago, I would have been so scared to even speak up or, be the speaker for anything.
Exactly.
So Andrea asked, out of all your candles, which one is your favorite candle and what are you currently reading?
My favorite all-time candle is Coquito. I love this candle because it's also most culturally appropriate for me, because I grew up with Coquito at all my holiday gatherings. Like I drink Coquito all throughout the holiday season. So it's like a no-brainer also for me to create this as a candle. And it's also being burned in my house like all the time. It's in my bathroom. It's like my whole house smells like Coquito way too often. And then one of my new up and coming fragrances is also one of my like, it's a total opposite. It's like a floral scented candle, and that one's also been like one of my favorites so far. Ooh, like, and I'm excited for when that comes out.
Oh, is that out yet? Okay, all right.
Not out yet, but I'm like, it is one of my favorites. And what am I currently reading? Oh my god! Let me pull this up. It'll be my next read, but it's called The Trouble of Hating You. This is my next book. This is from Sanjay Patel. And I love like young adult romance or just like adult romance in general. So these, like, I tend to gravitate towards love stories with BIPOC characters. Like, I don't really love reading about like the summer romance, like, of, white people on a beach. Like, it doesn't make sense for me. So I tend to really love to indulge in like Latina romance. Those are my absolute favorite. But reading for pure joy, it has helped me a lot. I feel so much excitement and joy, and I feel like my time isn't wasted. Like, I also like do a lot of audiobooks, like for autobiographies about other founders, or read about marketing, but like that's during my work day.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm packing orders, I'm normally listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook. Even when I'm in the shower, like, I'm listening to an audiobook. Like, as I do my hair, this is all because, it's a lot of work to be a curly hair girl.
There is.
So, I tend to try to gravitate towards like workbooks during like the work day, and then like my pure enjoyment, like Friday nights, I'm sitting reading.
Yeah, that's definitely something I need to do more. I'm a huge reader. I mean, you can't see I have books everywhere. But unfortunately, I guess not unfortunately, a lot of it is work related. And so I really need to get back in the habit of just reading, like, for you, like what you said, for the like pure joy of it. Every now and again, I'll get a good book, but I probably need to make that a regular practice of mine, is just reading for the pure joy of it.
Yeah, making the time to do it, like just carving out that time in the evening, to do that. Like, not getting back on the computer is like my number one. I can't get back. If I turn it off, I turn it off. Like, there are no fires to put out in the candle industry. All right, there are no fires no one's gonna buy. If I don't get back on my computer and answer their email, it can wait. And normally the consequences are on me, because I work for me. This is my business. So I take it I decide the pace it's going at.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, because as entrepreneurs, a lot of us will leave the corporate spaces, so we don't have those golden handcuffs. And then, we end up doing that within our own business too. Right. So it's a good reminder of, why we decided to be entrepreneurs as opposed to working, a typical 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. So just to kind of like round us out here as we're finishing up, and if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I am going to be picking a name to send a candle to. So, make sure to engage. But what advice do you have? Well, two things. I have two questions. One is, and this is specifically kind of for my the cohort that I'm facilitating right now. They're about to do pitch presentations as part of their final projects. So, they're going to be pitching their businesses, and, the businesses range from, consulting, coaching, to transportation, risk. I mean, it's quite, a fitness. So there's a lot of different industries being represented. So what advice do you have for, pitching your services or product? That's my first question.
So, funny enough, I never ever introduce my business immediately, or myself. I introduce the problem. I introduce the current state of the candle industry. And if you were here at the very beginning, I was saying, like, candle inclusion doesn't exist. So what do? My first slide in my presentation is, pictures of fragrances, of like pumpkin spice and vanilla cake and rose petals, with a candle in the middle that says non-inclusive, like not diverse, like something of that nature. It depends, like if it's an oral presentation or a written one, a written deck to be sent somewhere. But I normally just start with like the problem, like straight up, this is what the industry looks like to this day, and the problem is that candle inclusion doesn't exist. And so the solution is Latino fragrances that represent the experience of being Latino American. And that's how I introduced myself in the business. And it literally gravitates this person immediately in the first like 30 seconds, not even, more like 10. So my first piece of advice is always to present the problem first in the most compelling way you can. And if it's an oral presentation, pictures only, limited words, because you want the person to really feel compelled to listen to you. So I've always introduced the problem, the solution being my business, explaining why this business, and then why me. Why am I qualified? And because my business is based on fragrance, you can't smell it if I'm doing it through a screen. So I have to be able to tell the story in a way where you can relate to it. And so there's many times where I present just one fragrance and the story behind it, and I present, what's in it and pictures of like me, pictures of my family, and really getting to the root of the story. So whenever it comes to pitch presentations, like getting like your brand materials, brand voicing in order is number one. Like everything from your vision to your mission, your why, your where, how you're going to get there. You need all of those things to create a successful presentation and answer any questions that are on the panel that's in front of you.
So good. You heard it here from a pro. And then my last question before I get your contact information to share with everybody is, what advice do you have for, entrepreneurs that specifically for Latina entrepreneurs?
I always say, just start. Just start. There's no reason to hold back, even if you don't have a perfect product. Like if you're still in an iteration of it and you're not happy with it, but you can sell this, you need feedback. Your business evolves and grows with you. I think one thing I was really proud of myself of in the beginning was that I launched 6 months in. I wasn't necessarily ready, for obvious reasons, but the iteration of my website changed, my messaging changed, and it evolved with me. Like at first I was creating like these catchphrase candles that I felt like they were everywhere, and soon evolved into a greater mission and purpose in fragrance. So my, creating this unique value proposition. Saying, I'm the only one in the space doing this. The only one creating fragrances meant for Latinos and the Latino experience, rather than creating a catchphrase candle that says, make jefa moves or no soy ni de aquí ni de allá. Like all those things are great and empowering, but I also wanted to cement a space for diverse Latino audiences and voices. So get started. It will evolve with you. It will change with you. And being able to take feedback has been very, very important in my journey, and investing in yourself. One of the things that really helped propel my business is being able to get a business coach and finding the right one. I think, when you're creating your business, you have to put just as much work into the actual business as you are with yourself, and being able to get there, holding yourself accountable into all of these goals and getting that homework done. And so investing in yourself and getting started.
Yeah.
Two of the best pieces of advice I can give.
Awesome advice, especially that investing in ourselves. I think a lot of us come from, our families or, cultures that don't really know how to invest in ourselves because we've been more in this kind of survival mode very often. But learning to invest in ourselves we've got to think that long term. We got to have that long term vision of how it can support us.
Absolutely. And that also means taking care of yourself, which is why I'm going to be reading my book at the end of the week.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to it.
So I'm going to be sending a candle to someone. Melissa, pick a number, like 1 through 20, and I'm going to look who that comment's coming from and send them a candle.
16. Let's do 16.
LinkedIn user. And I think it's Stephanie Haynes that is who wrote the comment. Melissa, as the first mover of a new product creation, you have the potential to gain half of the market if any other players even try entering the game. So reach out to me. I will send you a candle, Bonita Fierce candle, on me as a gift for being here today. And just because I love, again, supporting Latina entrepreneurs and founders, supporting small businesses. And so reach out to me, send me a DM. I'll get your contact information and get you that candle. And Melissa, just so grateful for your, your share. I know we're trying to get schedules coordinated and everything, but I am so grateful that you are leading this space, that you're, that you have a much bigger vision. Like it's not just about candles, right? But it's about, celebrating our culture, reclaiming our culture, creating, like the Latino footprint within the fragrance industry. And so we're here for it. We're here for all of it. And we're happy to support you. Where can people find you and learn more about, Bonita Fierce Candles?
Well, you can find us on our website at bonitafiercecandles.com if you'd like to support and shop. You can find us on all social media at Bonita Fierce Candles, and my personal LinkedIn is my name. So you can search me there if you'd love to connect. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn, and it's probably one of my more favorite platforms because I get to be so vulnerable about my experience and share my journey. So definitely check me out there and support the brand in any way you can. Whether it's liking, sharing, commenting, engagement is so important to us.
And people
you can also find us at Nordstrom. You can shop Bonita Fierce at Nordstrom.
Yes, absolutely. And folks, put your buck where your mouth is, right? Like, it's up to us to support each other's businesses. So I always think that all the liking and sharing is great. I definitely encourage it. And, go out and buy a candle, buy a gift for someone, buy it for a boss, like spread the love, right? This is how we grow and use our purchasing power for good. So
absolutely.
Melissa, thank you again. And thank you everyone for joining in. A couple things before I wrap up really quick. Let's see. Let me think. Next week, Authentic Alex. Some of you might be following Authentic Alex on LinkedIn. She will be talking about. Actually, we're going to talk about reclaiming, like cultural identity. She's gone back to her mother's homeland. We're going to be talking about mother wound. So we're getting into some deep stuff here, some, generational trauma maybe that we passed down. And so we're going to be talking to Authentic Alex. Also 2 weeks from now, we have las doctoras coming in. We're going to be talking about India and like how Latinas sometimes are not always the most supportive of each other. We can be, but some of us are still kind of in that scarcity mindset. And so we're going to be talking about how do we move from like the sabotaging behaviors to becoming more unidos. And so that'll be in 2 weeks. So make sure to follow me if you're not already, to keep, updated on the different topics that we have going on. You can follow me on LinkedIn for more information. And just thank you so much for everyone. Thank you, Melissa. Everyone have a blessed day.
Bye.